Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sacker. Authoritarianism and conservatism have long been dominant forces in the Arab world, leaving artists to tread a delicate path. Female artists especially so. Now, has that changed as a result of the tumult and chaos caused by the Arab uprisings? Well, my guest today is the Kuwaiti painter and poet Shurooq Amin. Has there been a cultural as well as political awakening in the Arab world? Shurooq Amin, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You are a painter, you are a poet. Would it also be fair to say you are a provocateur?
I'd say people would agree with you there. I wouldn't call myself that because I don't aim to provoke. What I do aim for is to create an awareness and open a dialogue of things that the society considers are taboo, issues that society wants to leave dormant. I try to bring them out in the open, hold a mirror up to society, and try to create a transparency, because without creating an awareness and opening a dialogue of those very issues that are considered taboo, it's impossible to solve them. It's impossible to find solutions for them. Therefore, it's impossible to progress.
Right, but you do then deliberately set out to find those taboos and to shed light upon places where most people more naturally would prefer to see darkness.
It's not very hard to find those taboos in the Middle East. They're everywhere. I mean, the way the concept starts really is I hear things, I see things, I experience things that pretty much upset me. It creates a sense of injustice in me, and I want to respond to that. So I use art as my weapon to respond to that.
See, a lot of people, I think, in your own country, in Kuwait, feel that what results from your approach is a very negative image of your culture, of your country. I mean, you've been called time and again unpatriotic,
yes.
Somebody who actually hates your own country. Is there a certain truth in that?
No, there is absolutely no truth in that. They see it as unpatriotic because I expose the negatives in the society, and not only in the Kuwaiti society, but in the Arabian Gulf society in general. The way I see it is, I mean, would you abandon your child if your child was ill? You wouldn't abandon your child. You would treat your child. For me, the Arabian Gulf is my child, and I am treating it by exposing these negatives so that other people can understand that these negatives exist in society and we have to find solutions for them.
Right, but frankly, and we're going to look at some of your art, you only focus really on the negatives. You know, you portray a society that is so full of deceit, hypocrisy, double standards, a complete difference from what one sees in the public domain to what is really going on in the private domain. Right. It is a very unpleasant society that you live in, it seems.
I do portray the unpleasant side of society, that is true, but that is because that is the side that needs to be addressed. That is the side that we need to find solutions for. There's a lot of things in our society that we pretend it doesn't exist. For example, the problem of alcoholism. We have alcoholics, we have drunk drivers and alcoholics, and yet we don't have rehab for them. We don't have anywhere we can treat them, so we leave them alone to die in their homes with their booze, because we don't admit that we have the problem because we don't have alcohol in Kuwait.
Well, for those in the audience who are not familiar with your work, it's going to be useful, I think, just to show a little bit of what you do. Let's look at the first picture. You call it Diwania High, and the high, I think it's pretty obvious, refers to substances.
Yes.
And also behaviors, including gambling, that you are portraying there. I mean, these are guys traditionally dressed, but who are doing anything other than traditional lifestyle behaviors there. Just talk me through what prompted this.
Well, at the time, there was a lot of problems in the media with people who are preaching, who are in positions of religious power, who are preaching certain things in the community, and these people were caught doing the exact opposite. So this is actually a reflection of reality. So it upsets me very much that these men in positions of power, religious positions of power, who preach to the society what is haram, forbidden, and what is halal, acceptable, and then in the weekend or when they travel, they lead a totally opposite life. They say you're not allowed to drink, but then they drink. They say you're not allowed to do this, but then they do it. So I'm addressing the hypocrisy and the double standards of these people.
Right, because this was in an exhibition called It's a Man's World.
Yes.
I assumed it was more about sort of the patriarchy and about the double standards that men exercise in Kuwait, but you're telling me not just is it about that, it's also about your fundamental sort of problem with Islamic piety.
Well, it's not about...
I mean, so-called piety, because you're
exactly.
saying that the pious are really not pious at all.
Right. If you know, I have absolutely no problem with people who do practice what they preach. That, you know, respect to them. But the people who preach and they don't practice what they preach, the hypocrisy, that extreme hypocrisy, for me is unacceptable. So I am exposing that.
Well, you're exposing it to a certain extent. You had a real problem exposing it with this particular picture, because this was part of an exhibition that you put on early in 2012 in Kuwait, which was closed down within 3 hours of its first public show. And this particular picture was a big part of the problem. We understand from news agency reporting at the time, from documents that were seen, that officials regarded it as obscene.
Yes. They saw it obscene, as blasphemous.
Yes.
Well...
You can't have been surprised.
I was very surprised that they shut down the show, actually. I wouldn't have been surprised if I had been rebuked or, scolded in the media, or I was expecting a backlash to a certain extent, but I was not expecting for, 3 people from... 5 people from 3 different institutions or authorities to waltz into this show, take down paintings, physically take them down, shut down the gallery door, and sit me down and investigate me like a criminal and threaten to put me in jail. And, that terror continued for weeks post-shutdown of the show.
Yeah, the argument from the Kuwaiti government is that you actually transgressed laws, that there are audio-visual laws which your paintings did not comply with. We even spoke to a cousin of yours who works in the information ministry. He said, look, I can't tell you what the minister's official position is, but I can tell you that Shurooq needs to abide by the law just like any other citizen of Kuwait, and if she's showing paintings in public, she has to accept that there are laws that govern this. Do you accept the laws of your own country?
I don't agree that there are these laws. Where are these laws? I haven't seen these laws. I don't think this is true, actually. Our Constitution protects freedom of expression and protects the arts, and that's not applied. Because if there were actual laws for this, then why are programs, local Kuwaiti programs on television during Ramadan showing alcohol and people getting drunk? During Ramadan, TV programs, why aren't they following the laws then?
Let me ask you this simple question. Who is your art really for? Is it for yourself? Is it for your well-established sort of supporters and clientele in Western art markets who buy your paintings? Or is it in any way for your fellow countrymen, for the men and women of Kuwait and the Arabian Gulf?
That's a good question. I actually see my art as for the masses.
Do you?
Absolutely. I sort of see myself as the Pablo Neruda of the art world in a way, because I feel it's very accessible. The images are very accessible to people. They're easy to understand. Yes, there are layers and subtle nuances that perhaps the average layman wouldn't understand, but in general, if you look at the painting, you get the basic message. So I think it's a way to get across the board to anybody who, even people who don't understand art, who may look at an abstract painting and say, I don't get that, they will get my art.
Well, if that is your hope and expectation, that your art works for people in your own culture and your own country, you must have been a little taken aback by the reaction to what happened after your show was closed in 2012, because as I understand it, you got a huge amount of support from the international community, and you got very, very little backing and support from inside Kuwait. Even the Kuwaiti artistic community, by and large, was down on you, critical of you, and supported the closure of the exhibition.
Yes, there were artists who blogged against me, and some created rumors and said that I did it to myself to gain media attention. Some called me names. Some attacked me and said, you've opened Pandora's box and now all the authorities' eyes are on us as artists. You know, we could have an underground art movement like Iran. Why didn't you let sleeping dogs lie? And for me, this is absolutely ridiculous that artists would think in this way, because I believe artists do have a social responsibility. And not every artist has to be politically active or an activist, but absolutely there's a social responsibility there that we have to live up to. And to think in this way is very cowardly, you know, supremely cowardly as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I was very distressed the months following the shutdown.
But it does suggest you're out of tune with your own society. I know you don't want to be, but it suggests that that's the reality.
I felt extremely like a fish out of water, definitely. I felt like I didn't belong. And once I started getting the thousands of emails from the international community, it gave me the support and the confidence and the validation I needed to get up and start working again. I felt, okay, I'm doing something, I'm getting through to people. I may not be getting through to the people in my country, but I'm getting through to people on an international level, and maybe that's where I need to go.
Well, we'll talk more about that, and if that's the direction you're heading in a minute. But I want to introduce a second painting, because, you know, we've talked about your determination to tackle taboos, and we've talked about the particular problems you see with alcohol and the wider problem you see with religion in Kuwait and the degree to which there are double standards and hypocrisies at play with the practice of religion. But a lot of your work is connected to sexuality, sensuality, gender relations. That, of course, can also be a big taboo in the Arab-Muslim world. Let's have a look at this picture. I think you call this one the King of Hearts.
Right.
Now, it's passionate.
Yes.
And it's sexual. And I just wonder how far you have felt in your artistic career that you could push your interest in sensuality and sexuality.
Well, I'll tell you why I'm pushing it. I'm very much against what's going on in the country right now, and also this is internationally, globally, whereby violence is perceived as acceptable to be shown and love is perceived as forbidden to be shown. I mean, we are raising a generation of children who go into the cinema and they watch blood and gore being spilled out, and that's okay even at the age of 6 and 7, but if there's one kiss, it's immediately cut and censored randomly by a subjective censor. You know, at his whim. And what we are essentially doing is we are creating this form of bubble whereby these children are growing up to believe that violence is okay and love is not okay.
Right, but you see, this image interests me because you can read it maybe different ways, but ultimately it looks like quite a romantic, sensual image.
Yeah.
But a lot of what you, not just paint, but what you write in your poetry about the relations between men and women and the sort of connection between sexuality and violence, for example, is quite disturbing. I mean, for example, if I may just quote you a little bit for our audience as well from a poem you wrote, Taboo, which is a very evocative description of a young woman's body. I think it's metaphorical as well to a certain extent. It's talking sort of not just about her, but about Kuwait to a certain extent. But it is very sensual and evocative and quite explicit. And it includes references to menstruation. But at the end, there's this twist, because you paint this picture of men watching this female, and you say, watching you from afar, unable to touch you, own you, kiss you, love you. So they choose instead to rape you.
Exactly. And this is basically what's going on in our patriarchal society, men are so obsessed with a woman's body and her sexuality that all the laws and legislations that come up primarily deal with sexuality. For example, segregation. For example, a woman's dress code. For example, a woman not allowed to travel alone. All of these things are essentially about that.
But you are, if I may say so, with your approach and your determination to tackle these so-called taboos, you're taking on the entire Muslim hierarchy. You're taking on Sharia. You're taking on the very foundations upon which Kuwait and countries like it are built.
Well, I think that religion and politics have to be separated. I believe in a secular establishment. So yeah, I guess I am. And that's what I'm hoping for. With time, that's where we will head, because it doesn't make any sense.
But you aren't winning that argument, are you?
I wouldn't say I'm not winning that argument. I will tell you why. Because when my show was shut down, there was a lot of haters, and some of those haters a year or two later became my supporters. They came around because they saw that I'm here to stay. They saw that I had a purpose for what I'm doing. They saw that my vision was real, that my voice was real, and I think I earned their respect. So I think I am changing minds slowly, one at a time. I'm not going to be able to change the entire region by myself, but hopefully other artists will follow suit, other creative people will follow suit. They will gather the courage and the bravery to express themselves more and show more of what they believe is to be unjust. And I think with time, I will win.
Well, you might need a lot of time, but there is no doubt things are changing across the Arab world as a result, perhaps most of all, of the political tumult that we've seen in the years since the so-called Arab Spring. And there was such a hope during the first phase of that uprising era, such a hope that, you know, everything from sort of street graffiti to social networking to the cries of protest of individuals on the street represented some sort of profound awakening in the Arab soul, if you can get as sort of poetical as that.
Right.
And that arts would be part of it.
Right.
Do you think that has happened?
I think it's definitely happening. I think the arts are playing a huge role in terms of showing the problems and showing things. I mean, especially with Syrian artists, you should see what the Syrian artists are doing. They can't do anything about what's happening in Syria, but they definitely can paint about it and express themselves.
Well, that's interesting you say that. I'm just so mindful that some Syrian artists who've very deliberately taken on the Assad regime, for example, like Ibrahim Kashush, the protest singer, ended up murdered with his vocal cords cut out. It just seems to me that you could argue that the uprisings and the violence that has followed have actually confined artists even more. There's even less space for artists to express themselves because there is now so much fear, so much paranoia, and so much chaos. Artists can't actually be confident they can produce.
Well, that may be true to a certain extent, but I feel that we have to. I'm not saying we have to be martyrs, but you have to find a way to express yourself without putting yourself in direct danger. So maybe you align yourself with a gallery that will protect you, maybe you exile yourself, try to find a way. But to a certain extent, what you're saying is true, but then on the other side, I have to disagree and say that what's happening is giving us more passion and more subject matter to deal with and more to express. There's more anger, there's more passion, and that can only create art.
But it does come down to the level of personal commitment you have. You've talked openly about the degree to which your family has suffered as a result of the criticism you've received.
Sure,
I think your kids in school have been told that their mother is a whore and a witch.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how much of that you can take before you think, you know what, I cannot be an artist in the Arab world today.
I suppose it's a personal issue, I guess. It depends on how much courage you have and how much you believe in your mission. For me, I have unfaltering vision and an unfaltering belief in my role as an Arab artist. And they can't stop me no matter what. Whatever happened to my family understands. My children understand. They've seen me work since they were born. So I have no problem with dealing with any resistance that comes my way. I will deal with it as it comes. I never allow the possibility of fear to stop me from doing what I need to do.
We've talked a little about your children. Let's just have a look at a final image, a final painting of yours, because again, it's intriguing. This one suggests to me that you believe mothers in particular can have a profound role in changing the sort of attitudes, the mindsets of the next generation of particularly young men in the Arab world. Is that really what you're getting at?
Yeah,
here?
This is actually my favorite painting because it has a microcosmic meaning and a macrocosmic meaning. On a microcosmic scale, it is about a mother that is conservative, traditional, religious, literally opening up the eyes of her son and broadening his mind. He's oblivious, he's innocent, he's drinking his juice. And of course it's a boy, not a girl, because he's going to grow up to be a man. So she's raising a boy who's going to be a man that puts the legislation and the laws, because we are still a patriarchal society. On a macrocosmic scale, what I'm saying is we can still be, as a region, a Middle Eastern region, we can still be Islamic, we can still be conservative, we can still be traditional. And that does not mean we cannot raise open-minded men.
I understand your point, but it just strikes me that woman is not you. You know, you do not cover your hair. Frankly, you write poetry in English, not in Arabic. You are so westernized that if there is still this notion of a clash of civilizations with the Islamic world and the West at loggerheads, it seems to me you've got a problem because you don't fit in the Arab Muslim world. You're so far over into the Western civilization because of your background, your environment, your education, that maybe you can't speak to women like her.
I disagree completely. I feel I'm actually a perfect bridge between the East and the West, because I was born in the East, I was raised in the East, I have Kuwaiti father, Syrian mother, I live in Kuwait and work from Kuwait and produce this art from Kuwait. And
but
yet,
you did, if I may interrupt, you did say to me that given what has happened to you and the climate you have to live in, you might well have to leave Kuwait. And that's a symbolic moment.
Yes, I accept that I might have to leave at maybe some point. I will have to leave, maybe, but I accept that. I accept that. I'm fine with that. It still doesn't mean I'm not the perfect bridge between East and West, because I did study in the West. I understand the West. I've lived in it as well. I'm an Anglophone poet. So I think I'm the perfect vehicle, the perfect bridge between East and West. I can bring the East to the West and the West to the East. I see myself as a hybrid, actually.
And do you see your sons as inheritors of your ideas and actually the prime movers in the creation of a different Arab culture?
Absolutely. I see that I'm raising boys and girls who are going to be an asset to the environment they're in and the society they're in. And hopefully that will have a domino effect.
And it can change in a generation?
Why not? I mean, I'm not saying everything will change in a generation, but definitely a lot can improve in one generation. Absolutely, yes.
Shurooq Amin, thank you for being on HARDtalk. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. My pleasure.